Welcome back. Today we get to talk about the game that I am forced to call Unalive Squad Dispose of the Justice League. Turns out, right, the magic of Rocksteady consistently throwing off prototypes and then a single creative vision of a game from the director of the Arkham trilogy has ultimately led to the game being rather doomed. Now, obviously, it's been very easy to blame Warner Brothers. There are some hilarious quotes in today's story referencing things Warner Brothers execs have said. Overall, what we're dealing with, though, is what I think is rightly called bombshell report from Bloomberg that has basically got the scoop from inside Rocksteady. So, what we see here is workers who are on that game actually talking about all the BS and all the problems that they had to deal with while they were making what I think is the biggest flop of 2024. I mean, probably. It's definitely between it and Skull of Bones. Apparently, Skull and Bones is actually putting on some pretty decent numbers, but I do just have to think about how expensive it was. Still, Warner Bros. Did say they lost about $200 million in this one. That has got to sting. As does having to call this game Unalive Squad Dispatch the Justice League. YouTube is great in many ways, less great in other ways, and that is why we are building Bellular.games. And the big thing over there I want to talk about today is Loading Screen. It is our daily newsletter. In there, you get so much. Seriously, as times went on and the guys have got more reps in, Loading Screen is absolutely fantastic. You can get that in your inbox every single day by supporting us over at Bellular.games. I think it's one of the best newsletters of its kind out there, and ultimately, when we're in a situation where CPMs are down by 25%, and we get demonetization for silly things like the name of a video game, yeah, it actually does matter. But okay, let's get into things. So, a series of interviews with the staff at Rocksteady and Warner Bros. Has given Jason Schreier of Bloomberg his latest big scoop, and it details some of the chaos that led to this game's creation and how the development was hampered by leadership at all levels. It is a bloody insane one. Because this is not just a misplay by Warner Bros., it was absolutely a misplay by Rocksteady management as well. I'm going to read a quote. Development of the game was a tumultuous affair, plagued by countless delays. The game failed for a number of reasons, said the people, including a consistently shifting vision, a rigid culture of perfectionism, and a genre pivot that was ill-suited for the studio. Yeah, fair, Jason. You've hooked my attention with that one. So, this starts by matching with previous reporting, essentially with Rocksteady taking leadership on the project after WB Montreal's development of an Unalive Squad game running into problems, but then with the additional information that Rocksteady were actually working on a prototype of an original multiplayer puzzle-solving game codenamed Stones. Yeah, a multiplayer puzzler. And I think the codename Stones makes a lot of sense. I think a lot of executives would have said, wow, you need a pair of stones to pitch this one to us. So I think you can really see why any exec would probably look at that and think, right, multiplayer puzzler? Nah, we need something big money, major IP. So, Rocksteady's leadership and founders, Jamie Walker and Sefton Hill, made the call that they would pick up the baton from WB Montreal and return to the DC universe. Now, and per the sources, this was pitched to staff in 2016 in order to make the development and the release process a bit more efficient. Again, I go to a quote. According to people who attended the meetings, Hill explained that he saw it as a better opportunity than making something new from scratch, and the company hoped to release the game in 2019 or 2020. Hope, I think, is the operative word there. This did not happen. Instead, there appears to have been a variety of different factors in place that have ended up delaying this game. First, Warner Bros. Leadership, and then Rocksteady's leadership. Now, based on reports from sources, Warner Bros. Don't seem to have forced Rocksteady to actually take the game in a live service direction. Undoubtedly, it is something that they wanted, right? They flew to Rocksteady in 2016 to convince the studio that adopting a live service plan would be a good business decision. Again, I remind you of the broader industry context in 2016. Anthem had not exploded. Destiny was kind of recouping. Live service was the thing that everybody saw as the new, get ready to cringe, blue ocean growth opportunity. Okay, that actually hurt me to say. To continue, the decision to go with this ultimately, though, by the sources is framed as being the Rocksteady leadership. So, here's again a quote from Jason's reporting. Rocksteady executives soon decided that, in keeping with their parent company's newfound enthusiasm, that Suicide Squad would become an online multiplayer game with live service content. So, this was a genre pivot. It is one that obviously did not work. But there are actually implications throughout Jason's reporting that it might have been a more manageable situation had Rocksteady been able to consistently make good development decisions. You know, the sorts of decisions that would have had this game coming out in 2020 as they had originally planned. But they did not consistently make good development decisions. Number one, we have a fairly familiar problem. That is, that when you're making any kind of really big game, you do need to staff up. Now, a staff size of over 250 people over 7 years of development is pretty painful. That's going to cost you a lot of money. And thinking back to Warner Bros.' financial reporting, the $200 million loss certainly does make sense in the context of those salaries alone. But what's less understandable is Rocksteady pulling an Arcane Austin. Now, of course, Arcane Austin did Redfall. And this is the problem, right? Staff who were hired by Rocksteady really had no idea what game that they would be put on, right? That it would be a live service multiplayer game. That is obviously a very bad thing. One of the problems that consistently hampered Redfall is people were excited to work at Arcane Austin. They loved immersive sims. And because the game had not really been announced, they didn't know that what they would be working on is not an immersive sim. It is a sort of loot shooter thing. That led to a lot of brain drain from the company, and per Jason's sources, quote, many would depart as a result. Lots of people, they want to make a new Arkham game, suddenly they have got items with numbers on them. Whenever you do a shoot with a gun, because it's now a gun game, numbers come out of enemies, and for a lot of people, they just did not want that. But for those who did stay, the problem wasn't this pitch as a live service game, or actually, Warner Bros. Trying to monetize it. It was the founders of Rocksteady. This is where it's interesting, where Schreier's sources are giving multiple distinct examples of their direct involvement in the project causing chaos. In particular, he puts a lot of the blame at the feet of Sefton Hill, essentially suggesting outside of this article over in his Twitter feed that the premise and the story of the game, that was the vision of Sefton Hill, the director of the Arkham trilogy. Now, of course, you may think, that's insane, the Arkham games were great. How did the same guy completely, how did it go so completely tits up? Ultimately, it's going to be kind of hard to know. One of the downsides of Jason working with Bloomberg, who are a more a general and sort of business-focused outlet, is that when he does these reports, it does seem, maybe just from whatever editorial process, he's not able to put as much of a word count into it. So it's hard to say if this is just a detail that was lost in editing. Maybe he will give some clarification on on Twitter or something like that. But basically, it seems it's on Sefton Hill's feet. And in many ways, that's odd, because a lot of the people of the Arkham games absolutely did not like this. It sort of suggests that this level of creative control with one person did not pay off. Now, it also seems, again, per these sources, that his creative vision extended to all aspects of the game. The thing is, though, he had little interest in the wider sort of loot shooter, live service genre, so he didn't have as much interest there, and therefore that much experience. And that basically meant that he ended up being a massive bottleneck because he was not able to manage development efficiently. Again, I go to a quote from Jason's reporting. Staff members sometimes waited weeks or months for Hill, the studio's perfectionist co-founder and director of the game, to review their work, said people familiar with the matter, creating a bottleneck that further slowed development. He scrapped big chunks of the script and struggled to convey his evolving ideas, they said, confessing that he hadn't spent much time with competing games such as Destiny. The constant delays hurt morale and led staff to fret that they were discarding too much and failing to make real progress. So that is, of course, suggesting that this is going way beyond just narrative, right? That it's instances of mechanical prototyping for big gameplay features, that kind of thing. That at least in the case that I'm about to go into, are likely based on the Arkham games, but would ultimately be scrapped. Here's one, right? Again, I quote from Jason. At one point, Hill pitched an elaborate system of vehicles that would allow players to deck out cars with weapons and navigate through the game's alien-infested streets. But each of the 4 playable characters were already outfitted with modes of traveling, leading to more doubts among staffers. Why, they wondered, would players using Deadshot or King Shark bother with a motorcycle when they could just soar through the air? After months of experimentation and prototyping, the vehicle system was scrapped. Again, clear direction from leadership is extremely important, and I am forced to think about some of the pitfalls and strengths of indie game development. Usually, your first project goes tits up, and then you learn things going forward. One of the things that we very much learned is, no, you scope down, you scope down, you scope down, you reduce features, you don't add features, so that you actually have something that can be a cohesive, polished whole. Because in the indie landscape, when budgets are obviously a lot more tight, if you just throw 4 months into the bin, that could kill your company. Obviously here, when you don't have that kind of pressure, right? You just feel comfortable doing stupid stuff like this. A lot of people talk about how Blizzard's pace of development. Again, it seems to me that they did not have the pressure to ship things at Blizzard. They clearly didn't have the pressure to ship things at Rocksteady, and that meant that they were just, in a way, free to piss away time and money. That's obviously bad for their parent company, it's bad for their financials, and it's also bad for their workers because, right? Yeah, even if you're sitting there getting a grand salary or whatever, you're going to be deeply unsatisfied with your job if your work keeps on being binned. Now, this is combined with allegedly a pervading sense from management that things would just work out, which of course reminds all of us of BioWare magic. In fact, they say that a similar style of toxic positivity was framed by staff as the reason why the Arkham games had eventually worked out. Success basically covering up cracks in leadership and process that created the success. That's the thing. Sometimes you can win in spite of your weaknesses, but because you've won, you are then blinded to your weaknesses, which then means when the stakes and the money, when it all gets bigger, you find for yourself an absolutely colossal failure. Now, Warner Bros. Are also involved here. It takes many to tango. They have the classic flaw of any corporate conglomerate board. They have no bloody connection or idea to whatever the hell they are funding. As an example, right, here's an amazing quote from Jason's reporting. Despite the internal concerns among frontline workers, executives from Warner Bros. Kept reviewing demonstrations of the game, sending laudatory feedback, praising the graphics, and saying they expected Squad to become a billion-dollar franchise. Again, that is hilarious. I mean, it's also hilarious on top of, DC Universe Lamau. Anyway, a bit of a wild situation. If Rocksteady management keep on telling Warner Bros. Management that everything is fine and good, why wouldn't they believe them? Again, they're not looking into the detail. What they're seeing is good stuff amongst their game division, right? Mortal Kombat going amazing, Hogwarts going amazing. But of course, that blindness did not pay off, and ultimately this is a game that did not stand a chance, and I think the founders knew that. They jumped ship late 2022, just before the game was shown off in full at the Game Awards for the first time, and that left basically their staff holding the bag with a year-long delay, trying to make the game be something. Of course, their reward was that this was not a particularly successful game that lost WB $200 million. And again, if they feel like they've got to continue supporting its live service, they will probably lose many more $1 million. Now, let's talk about the reward for the founders, because there are actually some rumors of a new action-adventure game getting a publishing deal with Xbox, and that is a studio founded by the ex-Rocksteady directors. So, yeah, cool. But these were the minds that brought audiences the Arkham trilogy. So, clearly they seem like a very sound bet to invest in. But of course, Microsoft are probably now looking at today's reporting thinking, oh my god, like Phil Spencer's just thinking, oh my god, I've consumed so much of the industry. Why is everything failing around me? I don't know. What is it like? In a way, I can't wait until Phil Spencer maybe decides to move on and can finally give a frank interview and talk about the ups and the downs of things with Microsoft. Because man, there is a story to tell there. Now, there is at least one silver lining. According to statements from staff, there aren't layoffs planned at Rocksteady, so that is a good thing, especially because these were staff who were misled and they were messed around by their former leadership. If they don't end up getting punished for that, that is a really, really good thing. Look, this is a team that actually does have experience. The thing is, when you look at Unalive Squad, Dispatch the Justice League, as I've got to call it, you do see many bits that are really good, right? Like, there are parts of that game that are amazing. The problem is, none of it comes together. Bits of it fight each other. And obviously their live service, with the Joker coming, that didn't really set the world on fire. So this is a team who can make amazing things. They just have to be pointed in the right direction and not be completely wasted. As an example here, Schreier reveals that teams are now working on a new director's cut of Hogwarts Legacy. Obviously, that would probably make quite a lot of money. Now, the current leadership at Rocksteady, it does seem that they're at least be given some space to pitch some new projects like a new single-player title. So maybe things will be all right and we can again get a Rocksteady that is just putting games out there that we want. Because ultimately, as much as this was a total big shit show, it does seem, as we've dove into this, that the reasons are quite understandable. And again, if you look at, say, the graphical presentation of that game, some of those facial animations, when you look at plenty of parts of it, you can tell that team can still cook really hard. The problem is they were sent in the complete wrong direction with a bad plan. So let us hope that these workers get a better, more satisfying job as time goes on, and that we end up benefiting from that with some good video games. Let me know what you think. Have you played Unalive Squad Dispatch the Justice League lately? Have you came back for the new season? I somehow doubt it, but if you have, man, I'd be curious. Okay, thanks for hanging out. I'll see you tomorrow. Check out Bellular.games if you want to get loading screen and support the rest of the team.